usually when a foreign dignitary, be it Zelensky or von der Leyen or anyone else, comes to the Dáil, they give their speech, and then there's a chance for each of the individual party leaders or leaders of the political groups in the Dáil to respond and to give a 5-minute speech back. And this time they're not being afforded that. Joe Biden is going to come in on Thursday, he's going to deliver a speech, and then he's going to head off again. And I caught up with Paul Murphy, the People Before Profit TD, to ask him just specifically why it was that they had decided not only to protest the visit, but now to boycott the Dáil address too.
Yeah, I mean, we're very disappointed that you have someone visiting a parliament and simply using it as a soapbox to make a speech. Okay, fine. We had Zelensky before the parliament. We had von der Leyen before the Dáil. They're not people that we politically agree with, but fair enough. They get to come, make their speech. But in both cases of them that we had in the last year or so, then you had an opportunity from one speaker from each political grouping to speak and give their opinion. As we think it's very poor to use the national parliament simply as a soapbox for a big speech by a foreign president and not to allow any of the members of that parliament to respond to that, because we would want to give our opinion back to Joe Biden to condemn the policies of the US in terms of Israel, to condemn the policies of the US in relation to Saudi Arabia and Yemen, to condemn their lack of action in terms of climate change. And instead, we're being expected to just sit there silently, and then presumably the rest of the TDs and senators will be giving a standing ovation.
Kind of gets them off the hook, though, doesn't it? Because they obviously don't want to be pilloried for insulting a friend of Ireland by maybe sitting down through a standing ovation or feeling they had to shout something at him as he's making his speech. So not being present gets them off that particular hook. But I'm interested, he said Ursula von der Leyen, obviously the EU, Paul might have his issues even though he did enjoy a salary from the Parliament. But he doesn't agree with Zelensky either. Do we know who he does agree with?
It's a good question. It was somewhat of a confused statement, I suppose, when they were talking about the US president's opposition to Russia and then also their support of Ukraine, sort of in the same sentence, a little bit confused that way. In relation
he did
to
say
Zelensky, as far as I remember,
we had them and we don't agree with them, he referring to von der Leyen and Zelensky. But anyway, perhaps he can explain himself. But there won't be, therefore, some sort of protest in the chamber.
No, and I think that was kind of the fear when the Oireachtas was putting this together, that there would be, because when Ursula von der Leyen was in, Richard Boyd Barrett had his time as the leader's question, and he was, very open in his opposition to Ursula von der Leyen, to a lot of what Europe is doing, to this idea of potentially a European army, to this European cooperation with NATO and all the various things that he has roused with the Taoiseach with on a daily basis, but did it in his usual, how would you say, colourful rhetoric, which I didn't think they wanted to see in front of the president. So that's probably why. It's probably because of them that they're not getting the statements in the first place, and now just opting out of it entirely and instead organising protests that are going to happen around the country around the same time.